So we're finally here, part 3 of my VE Pro template setup. We've got everything set in Kontakt, everything's routed in VE Pro, and then today we're talking about how I take it into Cubase and where the signal goes. Okay, so I have everything in Kontakt, organized and routed. It's then routed through VE Pro and out to these buses down here. Now I already had these set up because this is just my template. This is how things work. So woodwind high long is going out of 1 and 2. And if we go to Cubase and I pull up my buses, there's woodwind high and long. And we can even look over here under winds for activate outputs. It was actually called 1 and 2, but before I named anything, the outputs just looked like this. And they showed up over here with those same numbers. So all I had to do was double click this and name it. And Cubase now says woodwind high long, and thank goodness it has the original output routing as well, so I can keep track of everything. So these buses over here, all the way down to here, these are mirroring these buses over here. They're the exact same thing with the very close to exact same name and in the same order. So I know that the high woodwinds always come through here. I don't have any extra audio connections I need to make because it's already set up that way. All I really need to do is double check the Midi connection. I'm going to do a blank Midi. It's not assigned to anything or named anything. And I just need to point it to the woodwinds. I think it was 39 was the correct one. Now I know there's a lot with VE Pro. The thing is, it's sort of universal. So even if I only need, let's say 5 MIDI channel groups for one computer, if I'm up to 39 in the winds, then it's going to show 39 for everything. But this is where the search function really comes in handy. I just need wind 39. So we should hear a piccolo. Excellent. That means that the MIDI is routed correctly and the audio is routed correctly. So let's figure out how we're going to label this, I guess, Cinematic Studio Woodwinds. Pick long. Now the nice thing with Cubase is when you duplicate things, it does the exact same routing, or if you add MIDI channels, it's going to do the same routing as well. But right now I'm just interested in duplicating because I want to double check the short, and I need to make sure that everything's being routed correctly. All right, this is normally in a different screen. So you can see the woodwind short. Now it's funny, I don't know what it is about woodwinds. You see I've got them wide open here as opposed to at Unity, which is where the brass is. And a lot of times, I think I'm probably going to end up doing this as well. Just, it adds about an extra 10 dB of gain. All right, so that's woodwind high short. Woodwind high long. So I know that they are working and routing through the appropriate bus. This is the literal return coming in from this guy right here. Click on that. So that's the output of VE Pro. Input into Cubase. And all I've got, if I make this a little wider, These are my reverb sends. So this is one of the reasons I have everything split out. I'll go into more detail about all this. If you're curious, just let me know. But the idea is every one of these returns has its own reverb, and then it all ultimately ends in its own group on the back end of everything before it hits the 2-mix. So now that I know that woodwind high and low are working, I'm going to go ahead and build my first instrument with the piccolo, the flute, and the alto flute. If I want to choose add MIDI track and I want to add 14 more of these, it automatically increases the MIDI channel number and it has the same output assignment. So that's really, really nice. Plus, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll copy this and then just hit tab and paste. I'm trying to remember what my articulations were. And I think we're going to have to double check because I don't want to retype it. So long, staccato, oh, trills, flutter, and marcato. Okay. Tab, tab. All right. And I've got a superfluous channel here. Usually what I do is just put an X on it and leave it so that I know it's empty on purpose. Now what I'm going to do is grab all of these, move my faders so that everything's turned up really loud, and just double check both the volume and the individual patches. Oh, that's a little louder than I thought. Yeah, I think we're going to pull the faders down in VE Pro on this specific library. Oh yeah, definitely. No short flute. No short alto flute. So see, I can use my arrow keys on the keyboard to go up and down and select these while I'm viewing my MIDI assignments. So I see that it is the correct port, 39, and it's the correct MIDI channel. What about the rest? No marcato either. Okay, alto flute. Well, first of all, let's deal with the volume. I'm going to pull these down to 0. Man, they are definitely loud, but that's good. That's what you want. And I've got the bus turned up there, so we may need to pull that down a little more too. The general idea here is to get the balance of this library. If I have my faders for CC 7, 11, and 1, which is basically volume, expression, whatever you want to call it. All the woodwind players are playing as loud as they can, and I want to get that balanced with the rest of my woodwind libraries. Now, my initial reaction here is this is a nice hot library, so I'm probably going to have to pull it down some more. But I'm not going to do that right now. What I'm going to do is try to figure out what's going on with the short flute. Oh, wait, I heard something. I think this might be a patch problem. Alto flute staccato, going out of short. All right, what if I reload it? Nothing. See, I know it's getting MIDI, and I know the routing's working because we already heard the short piccolo and the short flute. So it's something with this specific instrument. Now I can click on this. Now that this is selected, I have the keys down here. See, it's not playing anything. That is, see, I know it's getting MIDI. Interesting. Staccatomo. Staccatomo. That's the newest articulation. Staccatissimo, repetitions, and sforzando are not triggering. Okay, that's obviously something on the instrument level behind the scenes going on that I'm going to have to check out and fix. Well, we shall see. In the meantime, we know everything else is working. I wonder if the marcato is the same thing, where it's getting MIDI here. Oh, see, it's getting MIDI, but yeah, there's obviously something weird going on with the instrument itself. I'm going to talk with Alex about this and figure it out. But the important thing is we know the MIDI channels are working, we know the audio is working, so then it's just a matter of building the other 2 Kontakt instruments worth of woodwinds. A lot of times with this, I like to do the first channel. This was 39. I know the next one was 40. 40, and we're going to be on winds. And then from here, I know if I add my MIDI channels, it's going to duplicate everything for me with the correct assignments. So let's double check. I think this should be clarinet. Oh, you know what? I think I disabled it. I did. So this is a good time. I've got my MIDI fader, CC24 over here. Now normally I would just have it set as a control point here at the very beginning of the sequence, but I'm going to move the fader to see if we can enable this channel. Right now it's disabled, so all I got to do, it's on 0, which basically means disable. Anything higher than 0 will turn it on in theory. So I just moved the fader, and there we have it. There's my clarinet. Now consequently, if I pull the fader down to 0, what it's going to do is disable it. You see there's a little flash of green right there, and now it's going to disable. This is why I normally save everything purged, so that when it enables, it's not having to load gigabytes and gigabytes of sample content. It's basically only loading the empty Kontakt instance in terms of samples. There we go. So that's with the fader up. It always confuses me. Disable is with the fader up, but that's disabled, and then I can re-enable it now. I move the fader, and now it's loading again in the background. So while that's happening, I'm going to name all of these, starting with clarinet. So this should be the Marcato English horn. Great. Select all of them, turn everything up. Hopefully we don't kill ourselves. Good. There's obviously some big volume differences here, and I think what it is the oboe is set for a louder volume than everybody else. Not in the faders here, not in the faders here, but in the instrument preset settings itself. So here's our clarinet. If I choose this, this is set to -6. Usually I have it defaulting either to 0 or 6, depending on how much headroom I want. This is normally the kind of thing that I think a well-planned, considerate composer would do this at the very, very beginning. I always end up thinking about it later, so welcome to the real world. 0 dB. If it were on 12, it would be a lot louder, probably too loud. I have a feeling that these maybe need to be on 6. But if we look at the oboe, see, that one's on 12. That was what was really loud. The oboe was on 12. The clarinet was on -6. So there's literally an 18 dB difference between them. What I'll probably end up doing is going back and maybe normalizing everything to 6, but that's going to depend on how it's balanced with the rest of the woodwinds. We know we have these 4 MIDI channels that are basically not being used. And now I'm going to build the last page. Okay, so I got these guys built. Let's turn everything up and double check our, yeah. And with that, let's turn everything down. Maybe to the halfway point. Okay, so there's obviously, it's routed correctly, but there's plenty of room for volume here. So I'll probably go back and get everything balanced with that instrument selection panel I showed you. Make sure it's all on maybe 0, I think. I think it defaulted to -6, so we'll put them all on 0. So that's it for these guys. I'm going to put them in their own folder. And I guess it's going to be Cinematic Studio Woodwinds. And our color is what? That blue. There we go. Okay, so last thing I like to do is just double check my routing. I'm going to do bass clarinet. Open up the mixing board. So here is the return of the orchestra. This is what's coming in from VE Pro like we discussed. Woodwind low long, excellent. I have a reverb send specifically for woodwind low long, and the bus that it's going to is also winds low long. So here's there's the reverb, which is not turned on, but if I want to enable it, so it's got reverb, and that goes to this bus or group. And that ultimately goes through the outboard bus and to the 2-mix. So that is how everything's routed in Cubase. Now, ultimately, I'll probably put a couple of blank tracks that are turned off to break these things up a little bit. Maybe like here. Have something between my high woodwinds and my low woodwinds, just so that visually I can keep track of what's going on. The last thing I normally do is just make sure that the enable and disable is working. So if we look over here, I've got all 3 instances on and purged. There's no sample loaded. It's here, purge all samples. So that's the state that I want to basically save it in, was with the samples purged. But I also want to have these disabled. So it's going to turn them off. You're not going to be able to see them. Disable all 3 of these. Now I could do this remotely, but this is just for demonstration purposes. So all 3 of these are turned off. And I'd also be saving as I went, which I've been doing. I just haven't been boring you with watching me hit save. So these are turned off. Now in Cubase, it would just be a simple matter of basically recording, in this case, just me moving the fader, really. So there's CC24. So I would want to have it set to 1. And that's basically the launch command for enabling the channel. Everywhere where there is a MIDI channel 1, that's where you want to have the command. And that is why, if you look at the automation mapping for this guy, which is 39, it says channel 1. That's specifically what that's referring to, right here. Channel 1. Now, why would you want to specify the channel? Maybe Kontakt cannot independently load or unload like a channel. It's loading or unloading the entire instance of Kontakt. So this whole thing gets turned on or off. You can't choose to turn this off or to turn this off. It's the instance of Kontakt. But there's other plugins, maybe multiple MIDI channels worth of plugins. You want to be able to specify channel 1, channel 2, channel 3. With this, it's just channel 1. Because that way I'm targeting, I know that my channel 1 is going to be the channel that I use to trigger it. I turned it on because I wiggle the fader, so I'm going to disable it. So I'm going to keep my enable command here, and the idea is I hit play, I'm going to hit stop because I'm not running the whole sequence, I'm just kind of getting it to load essentially. And if I switch over to VE Pro, it's loading in the background, you just can't tell. And probably in a couple of seconds, it's going to turn on. There we go. So it's loaded up. There's everything. Now it's still purged, but the idea is as soon as I start playing any of these sounds, it loads them in the background as needed. So it's not loading all this extra stuff that I'm not going to be using. It's only loading the specific sounds and the specific Kontakt instances that I need for this project. I find that that makes it a lot more efficient in terms of workflow, memory usage, and just general thinking in my brain. So that's how it works, practically in real time, from Kontakt to VE Pro and all the way back through Cubase. See you next time.